old. My knees are hurting, my hips are hurting, and my children are getting older. My daughters, they're twins, they celebrate their 24th birthday tomorrow. Matthew celebrates his birthday tomorrow, but I don't think they're 24 anymore. And I can't believe that time has shot so quickly by. They were just infants. They were twin sons just a week ago. And now one is in Seattle, one is in Los Angeles, living a life of excitement and glamour and fun. And so this is the sort of time when I feel very sorry for myself. They're far away. And I think about when they were young and our life together. And I, like many fathers of my generation, spent far too much time at work putting my career, my job, and everything first, but I did do some things right. And one of the things that Susan and I insisted on was that we always ate dinner together. Now, when I was a little boy, when I was 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, the idea that I would eat anywhere else than at my house was just impossible. I'm wearing pants today. I'm going to eat dinner at home tonight. But in my children's generation, when they started hitting those magic years, when they could get on their bicycle and ride around with their friends, we lived in a small town in Vero Beach. They would say to me, well, can't we go over to so-and-so's house? Can't we have dinner there? Can't we go down to Sonic? Can I have $2? And I would say, no, girls, we're going to eat at home together, which made me very unpopular as a father. Because all the other kids were basically wild in the streets. Yes, we have gang wars in Vero Beach all the time. Well, one of the things I said as a compromise is that anytime you want to bring a friend home for dinner, you could bring a friend home for dinner. So it wound up that Susan and I, 2, 3, 4 nights a week, we would have somebody else's child at the dinner table with us. And at first this was a little awkward, but then we got used to it, and their friends got used to us as just being strange parents. And one of the things I discovered is that I had to sort of train these young boys and girls in table manners. In other words, I remember one girl took me 3 years of saying, please turn off your cell phone. Because she would sit at the table with us and be poking away and popping away on her phone. I said, you just don't do that at the table. And explaining how we did it. I remember Laura had her first little boyfriend, and he had just gotten a job at one of the big beach hotels as a busboy. And his job, he was so scared because he said, I don't know how to set a table. And I said, well, and I think we don't have many French restaurants in Vero Beach where there are 3 different forks and 2 knives, and you don't know where the oyster fork goes and the fish knife. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, I just don't know what is expected. I said, well, you put the napkin here, you put the fork here, put the knife here, put the spoon here. Now this little boy, his mother worked at night, his father had been long gone, and he wound up eating most days of the week at our house at dinner, and he just didn't know. His culture in which he'd been raised is that if you had a meal at home, it was because grandma felt like cooking. It wasn't part of his settled routine. But for me, it was cultural. This is just how it's always been. And to explain that you put the fork on the napkin, you don't just roll everything up in a ball and hand it on a tray. This is how you set a table. That you don't play with your phone at dinner. You don't eat with your mouth open. You don't do these things. I never had the thought that I had to tell anybody this. But in so much of my children's generation, that culture that I was raised in the 60s and 70s, was long gone. And when we read these accounts of Jesus eating dinner with people, we sometimes think, why is this in the Bible? Why is Jesus giving table manners to people? Luke had 3 years to pick stuff to share about Jesus, and what is so special about where the place guards go at dinner? Seriously, what is the big deal? Don't be rude by sitting here, sit there. And on one level, it's a perfectly reasonable question. Jesus did not come to save mankind from making social errors at dinner. He came to give us life eternal. And how do you connect is move out of our culture, move out of our understanding, move out of our area of common knowledge, and look at that world and see exactly what Jesus is doing. Because when we see what Jesus is doing, what we hear Jesus be saying to the Pharisees is, no matter where you've been, no matter what you've done, no matter what people say about you, you are loved by God. Nobody can take that away from you. How do we get from that? From the Bible. Well, the passage begins, Jesus was invited to dinner by the Pharisees, and they were watching him. This wasn't a quick meal at breakfast at McDonald's. This was a formal meal. What does that mean? It means there were no girls. Women and men did not socialize together in this period. The only girls you saw would be serving girls. There weren't the wives, and the family was not there. And you wouldn't sit at a square table in a chair or a long rectangular dining room table. You ate in the Greek or Roman manner, which is a horseshoe-shaped table, very low to the ground, and you reclined on a couch. And you lay on your left side with your elbow up, and you took your food with your right hand. And the host, the man giving the dinner party, sat at the head, the very point of the horseshoe. And the guest of honor was the person immediately to his right. Why to his right? Because he could see him. If you're lying on your left side, can you see the guy on that side? No, you can't. And the pecking order was the guest of honor, and then everybody else in lower ranking order around the table. So that by the time you got to the guy on your left side, you never saw him throughout the meal unless you took the great effort to roll over and see him. When I was a little boy, I was 18, and I was in college, I joined the Naval ROTC, and I did that for several years, but decided I didn't want to go into the Navy. I wanted to go a different route. But I did the midshipmen's cruises, and I did all the training. It was a lot of fun. It was a great fun. And I remember doing my midshipmen's cruise. And that was 6 weeks where we were sent up, a bunch of us, and we were assigned to a ship, and we had our first meal. We weren't enlisted men. We were midshipmen, or snotty-nosed so-and-sos. The lowest life form known to mankind were the Navy. But we messed with the officers in the wardroom. And I remember we went in, there were 3 or 4 of us, and it was a larger ship, so the wardroom table was very, very long. And at the very head was the first lieutenant. And we all sort of shuffled in, and some guys still thought they were in college, and they just sort of slaundered in. No, I think I'll sit right there. Well, then the rest of the officers came in, and I remember distinctly to this day, because I was a little shy, and I was sort of waiting, where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? And my friend had already sat down and had his elbows on the table, and the lieutenant senior grade sort of stood in back of him with his arms closed like that, saying, so snotty, what the hell do you think you're doing? You got all the way down, you're a lowest form of life, you're a midshipman. Because how we were seated at this table was by order of seniority. The first lieutenant, followed by all lieutenants, ranked according to date of commission, all the way down the table to us lowest forms of human life, midshipmen. This is sort of the world in which this dinner for Jesus was being held. And Jesus says, in this circumstance, in this situation, what I want you to do is not to be like that idiot midshipman 1981, but to wait and allow yourself to be seated by the host. Don't put yourself forward, nor put yourself behind. What Jesus is saying here is that you are loved. Because Jesus starts off this story by saying this is a parable, meaning this is a story that has a deeper truth behind it. And this deeper truth is we shouldn't push ourselves forward, nor should we cover ourselves up, because God loves you. When I was a little boy, I went to a school called Episcopal Academy. Can you guess what sort of school that was? It's an old school in Philadelphia run by the Episcopal Diocese of Pennsylvania. And it had 800 to 1,000 boys from the age of 4 or 5 to 18. And we would all tromp into chapel every day. And we had an old colonial building as our chapel, because the school had been around since the 1780s. And the way we were seated in alphabetical order by class. So if I was the letter C, I was seated here. For like 7 or 8 years, I sat between the same 2 boys. And then we had a second floor, and up there they put the Jews and the Catholics. Why did they put the Jews and the Catholics up there? Well, they told us because they didn't have to come down to Holy Communion, and it would be awkward for everybody to go up to receive communion and have the Jews and the Catholics stay seated. So we stuck the Jews up top. Well, what were those second floor originally built for? They were called the slave gallery. Yes, even in Philadelphia, we had Episcopal churches where the second floor was reserved for slaves, for black people. Because that's just the way it is. We don't see whites and blacks together. I'm not talking about Alabama. I'm talking about the North, Quaker-influenced Philadelphia, even at that time and that place. The world was divided by race, by class, by culture. And woe betide you if you were a slave that wanted to sit in the box in the very front of the church. That wasn't your place. See, Jesus Christ came into this world not to rank us, not to create a hierarchy. He's come and he's telling the Pharisees, you guys are looking down your noses. You are smarter, you are richer, you're more powerful, you're more successful than the world around you. And therefore you think you're closer to God, and you deserve the best space at the dinner table as the guest of honor. And you're fighting over that chair. But in Christ, in God, there is no hierarchy, there is no pecking order. St. Paul says this very clearly. In Christ there is no slave nor free, Greek nor Jew, male nor female, all are one in Jesus Christ. And it's taken us 2,000 years to get it right. To break free of the social and political and cultural prejudices that hold us back from sharing the gospel to all men, to all women, without reference to what they look like or what they smell like. So sometimes it's society, it's culture that tells people to sit in the back of the bus. Other times it's our own inner selves. We're not worthy to sit at the right hand of God. We're not worthy. We have lived such a broken, horrible life. I'm afraid that if I come to God, he's just going to wash his hands and tell me, go away. Friends, if you accept Jesus Christ, no matter where you've been, if you make your repentance, you are clean and made whole. Years ago, when I had a little parish in Sebastian, I supplemented my income by being a writer. And I wrote for magazines, and I had a book published, and all this fun stuff, and it made a little money. And one year, I was invited up to an author's dinner by the publisher in New York City. And Susan and I didn't have enough money for us both to go, so I went by myself to a dinner at the Waldorf Astoria. Never been there before, but it was a lot of fun. And as I came in, there were all these round tables with little place cards. And remembering my experience with the Navy, I looked to see where I was seated. And I finally found my seat, and being a single man at an author's dinner, that's probably a godsend for the party planner, because you need to sprinkle the men out in these things. So I had a seat really nice at the table next to the podium. And I looked at the names on either side. I didn't recognize anybody's names. I sat down, and then the person came to my right, and I stood up. And I think, John, you will have experienced this. Whereas you stand up to greet a woman, your stomach gets sucked in. Your chest expands, your voice drops an octave. You're manly, you're strong, you're brave, because this was a beautiful woman. She's about 20 years older than I am, 25 years older than I am. I was in my 30s, she was in her 50s. But man, this was a knockout, a striking woman. And I knew her, I'd seen her, but I didn't know who she was. And I looked down at her name again, and I didn't recognize the name. And we had the dinner, and we started, and we had the point where we're chatting, and I'm making all sorts of light conversation, and I finally say, I know who you are you? And she said, well, I started off as a model. I said, well, I don't really read, girl. She said, I was in the movies. She said, I said, which one? And she said, oh, I was in this movie with John Wayne. And sadly, only women in John Wayne movies I know are Shirley Temple and Maureen O'Hara. Problem when you're in a John Wayne movie, nobody remembers anybody else. I said, well, what else? She said, well, my biggest movie, my biggest role was in The Summer of 42. And I opened my eyes, and God forgive me, I said, that's the first dirty movie I ever saw. She was the older woman. I mean, I remember sneaking into the Ardmore Theater with my friends. In those days, you could sit in the balcony and smoke cigarettes when you were 12 years old. And we'd watch this dirty movie about a young war widow who goes to Cape Cod or someplace like that, and these teenage boys fall madly in love with her. And there's this woman who is weeping the loss of her husband, and I don't remember much else. I just remember the older woman. And I said, my goodness, that's you. And you know, she really hadn't changed in 25 years or 30 years. Still striking, still beautiful. And she began to tell, and I said, well, why are you, well, this didn't come out right, why are you at a Christian authors gathering? You're a dirty movie store, why are you here? And she said, well, let me tell you about my life. I was 14 years old. My father was a diplomat from Brazil at the UN. My mother was a New York socialite. We lived on the Upper East Side. I was going to the Dalton School. One of my classmates, their father was the president of the Eileen Ford Modeling Agency. And I went to a birthday party, and he saw me, and within a year I was on the cover of Vogue and Cosmo and Harper's, and this was the 60s, and life was wonderful. I would jet off to Paris, Milan, and London for fashion shows, and I was auditioned for a John Wayne movie. And then my boyfriend, the producer, said, babe, I've got the film for you. This will make your career. It's the summer of 42. You're going to play the older woman. I'm 21, she said. You're going to play the older woman, a war widow. Be on location. She said, well, can I have a little bit of time off before the film because I'm going to have a baby. We're going to have a child. And he said, well, I'm sorry. My wife is not going to be too happy about that. Here's $25,000. Go to Switzerland, be on location to start a shoot. Now this woman, this actress, was given such high praise by the critics because she's supposed to look so miserable about the death of her husband. Well, this woman was miserable throughout the shoot because all she could think about was she had just killed her child for a film. And she said, my career never really took off. I made a few more movies, and they getting worse and worse, and I started making made-for-television movies, and I started appearing on The Love Boat, and finally I was on Hollywood Squares. And when you're on Hollywood Squares, your career in Hollywood is over. I've been married and divorced half a dozen times. I was a cocaine addict, I was an alcoholic, and at 35, I was finished. So I took a gun and tried to blow my brains out, and I couldn't even do that. At the last moment, I moved my hand, and the bullet went into the ceiling. It didn't go into my head. They took me to a clinic to dry out, and there I met a man, and there I met Jesus Christ. And I married that man. In fact, I married her at All Saints Episcopal Church in Beverly Hills, which is not up north of Canton, Ohio. It's in California. And Elizabeth Taylor was one of my bridesmaids, and we joked in the vesting room that between us we had 15 marriages. And when I walked down that aisle in my white dress, and she probably read my facial expression, only in California would the Episcopal Church allow you to get married for the 8th time in a white dress at a church wedding. But hey, it's okay with the senior warden, it's okay by me. And she said, but when I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, I was washed clean. I did deserve that, wear that white dress, because Christ shed his blood for me and made me worthy. Just as worthy as some 17-year-old virginal bride, a 35-year-old washed up starlet is as worthy of being bought clean because Christ died for me. Sometimes people try to put us in their place because of our color, our class, our language. But other times we try to put ourselves in the lowest spot because of our guilt and shame. But when you accept Jesus Christ, you are clean, you are whole, and you deserve to be in God's right hand. If you are faithful, if you are true, if you repent of your sins and come to Christ, by right, you will enter that room and the Lord will take you from the very lowest spot and place you at his right hand in paradise. Each of us, for in Christ there is no slave nor free, Greek nor Jew, male nor female. All of us are one. Friends, repent of your sins. Come to Christ and know that the past is past. No matter where you've been, no matter what you've done, you start life over just as the baby, Quinn, Eloise Taburio, starts it today. When she's baptized, she becomes a full member of the body of Christ. You can mess up. You can screw up after you're baptized. You can just make your life a living hell. But you know, it doesn't matter, because you can come to him again. The Lord loves you. You are worthy to be honored. Don't let anyone, don't let your own conscience